Actually, we do a showcase every August. Yeah, I think this oh, big it is. A lot of rural and a lot of the start.
If you haven't been, you need to go to a fun concert. Yeah.
It's
Actually, there's somebody in the band, I can't remember his name, but he's an older fellow.
yeah.
West Virginia, my wife went to school with.
Really?
Yeah.
I would ask her. I don't know if I asked her. I'll ask her.
You guys know each other?
No, I haven't met.
Sorry about that.
Testing 1 2, testing 1 2. Okay. So anybody who is joining us live, welcome to the CSC Leon Executive Director Search Committee. We will get started in about 10 minutes. Thank you.
Hey, how are you?
Okay. Sure. I'm assuming you got the message that I was print for you, or did you print yourself?
Oh, no, I didn't. I brought my little notes though.
My special agenda, yes. Yes, yes. I think I'm good to go. So how you been?
Keeping my head above water. How about
That's
that?
all you can hope for.
What about you?
Good. I had a 4-day weekend, which was nice.
Yeah, that is nice.
Yeah.
I would like to remind you guys when we do get started, there should all be wired in. Yeah, all yours are hot.
Okay.
Good.
So
All
I'll
the
remind
time.
you that they are live and there are people already viewing.
Okay.
So as you, if you chat amongst yourself.
Be
but
careful.
it's not-
Hot mic.
Got it.
Good reminder. But honestly, the weekend, 4-day weekend just means 4 more working days till Wednesday, you know. That's not true. I did get to take a fair amount of time off.
Oh, great.
Did you try the bark? Did I talk to you about that?
Not yet. I told my daughter about it, so it's on the list for sure.
Excellent.
Well, and I've started this keto diet, so that, yeah, that did help.
No, you won't get a lot of keto at the
No.
bark, although I think you can eat.
All the vegetables, I'm sure, just not none of the substitutes for meat, I guess. I would have
Yeah,
to stay away from.
seitan and, well, they don't really have seitan. They have mostly, their meat substitutes are tempeh and tofu. Mainly.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm trying. I just need 10 pounds. If I can get to this 10-pound mark.
Keto is hard to stick with, but you'll lose weight on it.
Yeah, yeah.
Can I add one?
Sure.
responsibility to you?
Yes.
Extra agendas and speaker cards, should anybody here care to speak or just right over there. And I realized that in the past, we haven't told people when we're here where it is.
Yep,
And so Justin knows.
excellent. And we'll be able,
But if there's additional people in the audience.
yes, let me,
that would be helpful.
Got it.
Madam Co-Chair.
How are you
Or
today,
Vice
sir?
Chair.
How are you today?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
I'm great.
Good.
I'm great.
School.
I just told the judge, I'm trying to keep my head above water. It's a lot.
Ever, I guess I don't like with the judge. That the COVID has ramped up.
Yeah, so that's like one extra thing amongst all the other things that you have to do. Yeah, but we have been so fortunate. At our school, we've had very few cases and
Oh,
all of
that's
which
fantastic.
have originated somewhere else. So it didn't come on campus and spread, so.
Do you allow access? You know, the judge is in a courthouse where anybody can come and go.
Mhm.
Do you allow any parent to come and
No.
go? Because I know in my childcare centers that I'm with the owners,
Mhm.
they
No.
don't know parents in.
Nope, no visitors,
Yeah.
no mentor, nothing. Only the people that work there or like, people that provide services for our kids, like OT and PT. But other than that, no.
And you can't, are you able or is it against the law or to require vaccinations or do anything?
No, we can't require that. No, we can't even ask about it, so,
Isn't it wonderful where we live?
yeah.
Jim just got back from France. He was telling the judge, he told me the other day. that they are really-
Holly was warning us, by the way, that just to,
Yeah, that's
our
true.
mics are hot and people are watching, by the way. So just be aware.
Thank you.
Thank you again for the reminder, because I will.
He said they
We
take
do-
it seriously.
in fr-
Even if you go to a bar or something like that, you can't get in without a vaccine card.
Oh, really?
Carte vitale, that's the French way. I read a book about healthcare around the world. And my wife and I actually have a friend who's a missionary in France, came to visit us a few weeks ago. It was news to me that there were missionaries in France. He's a missionary in France, a really good guy. But he's got French citizenship now. And he is as Southern as they come. So
Oh, wow.
he's got his carte vitale. He was showing it to me. I was very curious about it because I read this book,
Yeah.
talked about
It's
their
gotta be
about their
fun
system.
For a French person to hear French with a Southern drawl.
It is. And
I'd
he
like
talks
to hear
about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
How,
wonder if we could pick up on it.
Yeah,
how good is your French is such an important question for them over there. It's really a big deal, and his fluency's gotten much better, I guess. But the whole healthcare idea is handled so much differently. He says if he goes to the doctor, he can anticipate that the doctor is going to spend an hour with him, regardless of whether he's there for something, specific, or if he's just there for his checkup, that there's going to be a significant amount of time that the doctor spends with him as opposed to the 8 minutes that were allotted. Hey, man,
How are you?
how's life treating you?
What's that?
How's life treating you?
It's treating me well.
That's all you can hope for, man.
Good day.
Yeah,
Good
yeah,
to see you.
yeah. Congratulations. Did you guys hire President Thrasher?
Again,
That is awesome.
both TK and I call him speaker. I will always call him speaker. Have always had the office on either side of me. And so at one point I had, because they were both house speakers, I was like speakers in stereo. I was just, and they both come from a slightly different political bent, although, so they would, and I'm always the insurance guy. Well, they come in and I'd be yelling at the television. I'm not a big Charlie Chris fan who'd like destroyed the property insurance market. The two of them used to come in and like perch in my office. I'm like, I'm in hog heaven. These are two of like my heroes. And so yes, speaker is back.
So you know what? I should be careful. Holly was warning us. The microphones are all hot and we are broadcasting and people are watching us, just so you know.
Well, I would say all of that directly to all the people involved.
I don't doubt
Although
it.
TK is tough to talk to in heaven.
Yeah.
But you still say, more importantly than anything else, FSU played pretty pretty doggone good.
Oh, it was great. It was
Wasn't it
great.
something?
We had an amazing tailgate
Oh
party.
my gosh.
There was, yeah.
And there's the quarterback from UCF, unbelievable.
It's such an amazing story. Just as kind of like make every human being feel good.
Yeah, and your surgeon is there to watch your medical miracle. I mean, unbelievable.
Yeah, and his comments about, God is real, and that whole thing is just, again, regardless of anyone's faith, it's so inspiring that this 22-year-old kid is just so grown up.
Yeah.
At 58, I'm like,
Yeah, no, I know.
40, please.
No, yeah, the answer is no. And
Yeah, he took it all for himself.
but yeah, make some room for you. The whole it was a fun game. It was a fun game.
Oh, it was.
Do you stare at the weather like I do? I got up this morning and saw that orange X in the middle of the Gulf, and I thought, oh man, here we go again. And we are going to get wet. This weather's going to be bad the next couple of days, but
Well, this morning, I don't remember what time it was, but it woke me up, but I refused to look at the clock because I'm like, this sounds so good. I'm going to enjoy this. So I went back to sleep. But my prayer is always that it stops
yeah,
when it's time for the kids to come.
yes,
That
it's a
reduces
mess.
our attendance.
Yeah. Oh, I
So,
didn't even think about that.
yeah, and then we walk a group of kids home each afternoon, about 10 to 12 kids. So my prayer in the afternoon is, okay, clear it up before we leave. And almost every time it does.
Well, and thank you for that, but.
You technically have a quorum, just letting you know.
Oh, we have a quorum. All right, excellent.
I mean,
Well, when they're done yakking, we'll get started because first rule of meetings, don't start, never finish.
Yeah, it's still, yeah, you'll be able to.
That's
You know?
All right, so I think we've got a quorum. Paul, should we get started? What do you think? We're a little early.
I can maybe hold off just because,
Well,
just because,
hey,
I
Mark,
gotta tell you, I give deference to the second largest employer in the county,
thank you. Hey, sir, how are you?
especially on
This
decisions
one.
like this.
Careful, sorry, I tried to trip you.
That's my fault.
Good afternoon.
How you doing?
Great.
Judge, is it just now? 3:30.
It is 3:33.
Oh.
Well, we'll give it
Let's
2
give
more
Commissioner,
minutes.
right?
Yeah. We'll give it a couple more minutes.
Testing. Testing.
Here.
Testing.
There she is. Hello, Commissioner Cummings. Hello, Mr. Haynes. Thank you so much.
Hello, Commissioner.
I apologize. We had to decline it and walk.
Your apology is not necessary, but we accept it. I do.
final test.
Right. All right, so this is John.
Thank you,
Schuster.
Jessica.
This is the Children's Services Council of Leon County Executive Director Search Committee meeting, a duly noticed public meeting. of a committee of the Children's Services Council of Leon County. So we are to order. I'll note that the entire committee is present, so we have a quorum. Mr. Granger, the first item on the agenda is to approve the agenda. Mr. Granger has asked me to add an item to the agenda, which is specific direction for the committee to issue on how the candidate interviews will be conducted under the Sunshine Law. And I'm going to ask Mr. Granger, assuming that we approve that addition to the agenda, to address that at the very end.
Well, Judge, for purposes of at least conversation, because I'm not sure what that means exactly, but I am totally good with approving the agenda as amended with that one item. And if somebody seconds it, then Mr. Granger can explain what he means in terms of, following Sunshine, because, yeah.
I second.
All right, so it's moved and seconded. So if there's no objection, we'll add that agenda item and he'll explain it to us at the end. And then if we don't like what he says, we'll just smite it from the agenda.
Yes, it's on the agenda officially.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
where
ma'am.
is it added?
It's going to be added under item, it will become new item 8, right before interview agenda for the next meeting.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
can you please remind all of the council members to lean into their microphone, just so that we do have several individuals who are live streaming?
Yes, so
I know everyone's wearing their mask, but please lean in. Thank you.
speak into the microphone. We are, yeah, and it's a good reminder to us that we don't have the ability to turn these microphones on and off. So we are all broadcasting all the time. All right, next item on the approved agenda is public comment. Do we have any public comment cards?
Yes, sir. Mr. Justin Fitzpatrick.
Is Mr. Fitzpatrick present? Hello, Mr. Fitzpatrick, whenever you're ready, sir.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Justin Fitzpatrick. I am a resident of Tallahassee, and I stay at 2000 Merchants Row Boulevard, Tallahassee, Florida, 32311. And I am also the Community Engagement Director for We Are All We Need Incorporated. On this upcoming Sunday, not upcoming, but the next Sunday, September 19th, we'll be hosting a conversation entitled The CSC and We, a community forum on the Children's Services Council here locally, where we will be featuring the administrative team here of Mr. Ted Granger and Ms. Holly McPhail as our featured panelist. And I wanted to openly invite all of you to tune in if you would like. The registration link will be posted tomorrow on our social media websites as well as our website as well. And I just want to invite you all to come and tune in if you would like to have a chance to see the underrepresented communities here in Tallahassee have a voice in the CSC Council and ask some questions about what goes on and what has been happening in these meetings and to get an understanding of what happens, with this council. So I just wanted to openly invite all of you on. We will be posting the link for registration tomorrow, and it will be on Sunday, the 19th from 6 to 7.
You can talk faster than I can think. So can I get you to say the name of your organization again and your name
Yes.
again?
I'm the Community Relations Director for We Are All We Need Incorporated. Is a nonprofit here.
We
that
are all
we need.
we need.
Yes.
Thank you.
Incorporated, we're a nonprofit that works here in Tallahassee to help underserved communities receive the resources that they need if they are afflicted by poverty or mental health issues. And a big thing that we're starting this year is to have conversations with our community leaders about things that are happening in our community to get an understanding so they may understand what is afoot in their community and be open to receiving those resources from the community leaders as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you for inviting that. Mr. Granger, maybe go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chair, as a reminder, and Holly reminded me of this, if any of you do participate in that, it will be an open discussion. If you speak and another person speaks on the council, it becomes an open meeting under the Sunshine Law that has to be noticed and agended, et cetera. So I encourage you not to speak and to listen at this.
Mr. Granger and Ms. McPhail, I will also point out that it is only a public meeting if we are speaking on an item that we will in the future, take up and vote on as a council. So we can go as members of the public and speak our minds on anything. We just can't discuss an item that will come before the board from the moment we speak it going forward that we will vote on. That's the key. So we could all go out to Mr. Fitzpatrick's event and say anything we want. Well, not anything, Mr. Fitzpatrick. We'll save you from that, but we just have to be careful that we are not discussing action items that will come before the CSC itself.
I guess I would just suggest that if we're talking about the CSC and the ITN and the potential candidates for the position and community investment grants and potential expedited funding grants and all the things that involve the CSC, the possibility of that happening might be heightened.
Those are all things that would come before the CSC, and
gotta
those
be-
would, yeah, we would be.
Got to be careful. Got to be careful. Maybe that's for the advanced class from Pat
Gleason.
Gleason. Yeah. All right. Thanks so much. Any other public comment?
No, Mr. Chair.
Excellent. Thanks so much. All right. Next item on the agenda, review aggregate scores for the top tier applicants. Everybody should have received the spreadsheets that Ms. McPhail and Mr. Granger sent to us. And I know Ms. McPhail and Dr. Croteau are going to review the compiled results. Ms. McPhail, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll start by just identifying the two spreadsheets that are in your document. And for those that might be sitting in the audience or viewing from home, these are all available on our website under the information tab. The first one is the aggregate results by evaluator. You'll see that there are 5 columns, and that includes your totals that each of you came up with consistently down each row, and then they're added at the end. They are presented in rank order based on that total composite score. The second spreadsheet is where we took the 6 columns, the 6 domains that were agreed upon at our meeting on August 24th, and shows the total score by candidate within each of those different domains, again, with the total at the end and sorted by rank order based on that total. But that's just to provide you with the full details of how the composite scores ranked out to inform you in your discussion. I believe that if there's I'll take questions for how it's organized, and then I'll turn it over to Dr. Croteau to lead us through the next activity.
So I did have one question, which is I did a couple of spot checks on the averages, and that I'm not sure what it is that we are averaging to reach those numbers. Are those averages of the
Yeah,
individual?
that was more confusing. That's true.
I put the average in there. So on the first sheet, the average would be the total divided by 5, since there are 5 of you. On the second
see.
sheet, it's the total divided by 6, since there were 6 domains.
I see.
Well,
I am
Have I
easily,
said that actually?
But no,
It's the total divided by 5. So sorry. So that's why on the second one, they didn't change. That's your total score divided by 5, since there are 5 of you. And that's
Okay.
consistent on both. It's
but
not,
it's not the average
Not
on the
divided-
6.
that is
and
correct.
not by the criteria.
Sorry. Thank you so much for the correction.
Fair enough. Actually, fair enough. Sorry about that.
No. I
right.
realized that I didn't change that. It was just showing which columns to show. All of the data, if it just isn't easy to print out, because it would be about as long, I think, as the 4 tables up there. But it's all compiled in a worksheet that we just hid columns just so for the purposes of printing.
All right. Any other questions for Ms. McPhail on the spreadsheets? Any other questions? All right. So now Dr. Croteau will facilitate discussion that will result in identifying candidates invited to first round interviews. You're
Well, thank-
recognized.
Yeah, thank you for letting me join you and help in the process. What an unenviable task that staff had, first of all, to deal with, 160 applicants that you had, and then to break that down, and then your review of the 30 or so, that's just crazy. But it says something about the importance of the position and the concern in the community, the people who want to serve. So I think you have a great list of people to work from, but the challenge is how do you narrow it down? There's a couple of ways to look at these two charts, and the first is the easiest. You take the rankings of their total scores and you say, okay, we like these 5, we'll do those. Or if you like these 7, or you like these 10, wherever you decide to draw the line, that's one way to do it. Another way to look at it that I talked about with staff is if you highlight the number of high ratings, 20 or above, that each of the candidates received from the evaluators, you can look across the evaluators and get a sense who most impressed the committee as you looked at those resumes. And I think we have a list here. All 5 of you rated 20 or better on their scores for those 3 candidates that are up there. To me, that says, yeah, there's pretty much agreement among you that those 3 ought to be included in the set. And that's, that makes sense. If you look at who 4 out of 5 of you addressed rated highly, then you have a half a dozen. And obviously it's a little different than if you just took the straight rankings. So you have kind of a choice there. I also did an analysis across the categories, the job dimension categories, and it pretty much reinforced the idea that Kellyati, Chris Letsos, they were the 1 or 2. If you looked at the top 6, it pretty much overlaps as you take rankings for each of those. So the choice that you have is 1, how many people do you want to interview? And then how far down the list you want to go and which criteria you use, whether it's your agreement or you just straight rankings. I do add 2 caveats. 1, you have to look at the list, and I did not review these, so I don't know these people except the local ones. You have to look at diversity clearly, because that is one of the key elements that the community has a concern about with the Children's Service Council. And from the start, that was a recommendation from the Planning Committee. And the second is local versus out of town. I know that's important to some people, whether the skills that someone from out of town brings compensates for their lack of local knowledge, or does local knowledge trump the job skills that you're looking for. So that being said, I'd like to first ask the question, if you have 5 people, you could probably, if you use the structured interview that we'll talk about later, you could probably get them interviewed in 1 session. If you have 7, 8, 10 people, you obviously will need a second session. So the question you have to answer is how many people do you want in that final group that you want to interview?
Mr. Chairman, I have an opinion, not necessarily on a specific number, but the concept. When I went through these, the resumes themselves, look, you can't help but, certain resumes, the name is billboard size, so you can't miss their name. But for the most part, I really don't know anybody in this stack. So it was easy for me to go through and evaluate in as non-biased way as I possibly could. And there were some that just rose to the top for me. The idea that, but then when I went back and looked at them and then kind of did a little research on them. There's some people who just look really good on paper, but they may not necessarily perform well in some of the areas that, I mean, this is them telling us what they've done. That's all I could go on, is you telling me in your resume, based on the job description, what are the skills that you've performed in your previous jobs. Again, I may be at an advantage because I don't have a bias because I don't know anyone. Maybe I'm at a disadvantage because I don't know anyone. But I don't want to limit I tell you this as a background to, I don't want to limit the number of interviews for ease. Because again, we are basing, if you're scoring just on what's on the paper, and that's all we were supposed to do, we are basing it on what they put in their job descriptions and, talking about their personal strengths. And they might be a little bit biased. You should see my resume. It's very impressive. So I just want to be a little bit careful that we don't limit ourselves because of wanting to get it done sooner rather than later. I'd much prefer to sit through 5 or 6 interviews rather than 8 or 10. But if somebody in the number 9 position, missed by a point or two because I graded them poorly because I didn't really know who they were and what they did, that would make, 1, me feel pretty guilty, and 2, I think we might miss the best candidate. So that's my feeling. I don't have a magic number in mind. There were 6 that for me they bounced to the top, but there were a couple like 7 and 8 that were really good. They were very impressive. I just don't know who they are and what they've really done in life.
Yeah, I think you point out a dilemma that you face, particularly with local candidates, is that you are asked to look at the resumes, and the people who are asked to address the job dimensions in the resume, so you got a little more information than you would from a standard vita that just describes their job experiences. But you're at a disadvantage because some people know some people, and our staff asked you not to let that color your decision-making. So your point of maybe making the list a little longer to be sure it's a little more inclusive is, I think, well taken, and recognizing that it may take a little more energy, a little more time, but you may be able to find that the next level where you really dig into not just what they said in their cute write-up, but what they say in a structured behavioral interview gives you more information to make some decisions. So it sounds like you're willing to look more than just the top 5. And
one voter is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Any other comments, discussion? Anyone else want to?
Yeah, I'm not opposed to going beyond 5 for sure, because for what you said, there could be, the ones that I chose as my top did not fall in the top, but to give us room to find the right person. And that's our goal here, is to find the right person. So it may take us more than that top 5. So I'm in agreement.
Gentle reminder to please lean into the
Commissioner?
microphone.
Yes.
Got it.
Mr. Chairman, we had some really good, very good applicants. Scoring them, I found it was relative. I had to go back because it's just like grading college papers. It's relative, college essays. There's a curve that's set, and sometimes you have to go back and adjust. And going through the applications, the resumes and references and what have you, I found myself going back, adjusting when I got to an applicant that was more outstanding than the other ones, or got to one that was less, So in other words, this was a very real exercise. And I think
Hmm.
most of us were fair, impartial. We looked at the information that was provided to us. And I think in doing our analysis of whether or not we're going to interview 5 or 10 or 15, I agree with Mr. Mitchell that what we looked at and what we evaluated was self-serving on the part of each applicant. And that's what we do.
Put
We
your best
do
foot
our
forward.
resumes to put the best foot forward, absolutely. And the person that's ranked number 10 might be the best person for this position, but perhaps just didn't include a lot of information compared to the person that's ranked number 1 and number 2. So to be fair with all the applicants, I don't think we should limit it. I think this exercise was for the purpose of doing a ranking. And I think we've done that. And I think to be fair to everyone, I think we pick a number. I don't think we cherry pick and say, let's look at applicant 1 and let's look at applicant 17 or 18. I think we choose a number if we want to interview 15 people or 10 people. I don't think we need to interview any less, Mr. Chair, than 10 people.
Right.
And I would say that the first top 10 on the ranking
All
would be
right.
my recommendation.
Mark.
I don't disagree with any of that. I think we're just going through a screening process to get to the point where we can get it to a manageable number to interview. But remind me again, just the process of interviewing. We're not trying to narrow in one fell swoop a number of 10 down to the single candidate, are we? We're going through a,
Two.
that's why I thought. So with that, I'm assuming that the first series of interviews would be more abbreviated, 30 minutes-ish or less,
Well, I'm,
20 minutes.
Maybe we can,
That's what I'm asking. I'm asking, what is the process? Because the process will help us to define what that number is, whether it's
let me set
5, 6, 10, 12.
it up this way. If you turn to the next part of the agenda, the next meeting dates, there are 3 proposed first round dates that are there.
Right.
Saturday, the 18th, we were hoping, well, we being me, was hoping not to work on Saturday, the 18th, but it's there if we have to have it. Monday, September 20th, and then Thursday, September 23rd is a meeting to select candidates for the second interview. Monday, we could go a little later. We've got it blocked out from 2 to 6, but we could go from 2 to 7, something like that, 2 to 7:30, 2 to 8 o'clock, God forbid. So part of it is because I agree and I disagree. I agree in the sense that I recognize that we're going to have to set an arbitrary cutoff, and it's arbitrary. But I don't want us to degrade the decision that we make by limiting the resource that we have in terms of the time to actually talk to people,
So,
the specific people.
so I'm assuming, Jim, I'm looking at this process. The next round is basically now the next level of screening, which is the screening interviews, which are there. I'm assuming these are not going to be extensive interviews, but really more to identify the individual, hone in on some
yeah, they're
specific
going to
issues.
be behavioral,
So-
targeted behavioral interviews is what we're recommending.
Right.
You have to remember some of your top candidates are out of town and you're not going to bring them in for a 20-minute interview. It has to be substantive, has to be defensible. It has to be something that they feel that they've gotten a fair look at. But on the other hand, your schedules are terrible. You have
So-
8 hours, maximum, maybe 9 to work with. And, to do a substantive interview, you probably need 50 minutes or so in each one. So you're probably limited to 8 or 9
Well,
interviews
that's what I'm trying to
we
get to is
have.
what is the length of this next interview process that you think is appropriate? That's what I'm trying to get
I
to.
think no less than 50 minutes, given some of the constraints that you've talked about already.
55-0 per candidate.
5-0 per candidate.
5-0 per candidate.
It's the minimum that,
Okay.
that you really can work with and cover all the dimensions.
Now, do we have any requirement that these be done all in person or could they be done by Zoom? Because there might be some candidates who are out of town.
Is not the, is you, not the persons. It's to be sure that all that, all you.
No, I'm talking about can the candidates be presented by Zoom? Because again, these are screening interviews and not all these candidates are in town. Can they present via Zoom or are we expecting them all to be in person? Just trying to ask.
Yeah, the expectation from staff, as I understand it, was that they would be in person because
Okay,
obviously because of the importance of you meeting the person
okay.
as part of that screening process and getting a sense, you know, for their communication skills and also their
Okay.
an interpersonal sense about them.
So if we're talking about 50, if that's the recommendation, it's a 50-minute interview. There's a 10-minute break in between. You have to have some period. And then there needs to be 30 minutes in there for some lunch or people aren't going to go 8 hours without any sort of nourishment. So unless you want us to eat during an interview, which is kind of a rude thing to do.
Well,
So-
your schedules don't allow for 8 hours.
I'll bring my food and then
So,
no one will eat.
I eat Uncrustables and I can eat them in 2 seconds and at the seating without being too rude. But we're talking about 8.5 to 9 hours, right?
Correct.
So that would tell me that we have 8 candidates. I'm just trying to get to a number. I mean, I'd like to do 10. But I think unless we're going to go for an 11-hour day, we're pretty much
I agree-
down
I
to
agree with you. And actually,
8.
I did an analysis.
just trying to back into a number.
On the dimensions to see who was number 1, number 2 across each of the dimensions, to be sure that your chosen highest priorities across those areas were included. And the top 5 were and the top 3, if you can follow this, for at least 3 of you, and the top 8 on your list through Travis Anderson were in the top 6 in at least 3 of those categories. So if you stopped at 8, number 8 on your ranked list there, you would have included everybody that you had 3 or you had 4 or 5 of you all highly rated, but you would also include the top 6 of each of the dimensions that you had. So to me, it's defensible to draw the line there, looking at all the data that's in front of you in these charting.
Mr. Mitchell.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Ted, maybe this is a better question for you. Forget about round 1. Let's go to round 2. What do you have slated in terms of time for round 2?
Right now in round 2, we have Monday, October 4th from 2 to 6,
Okay.
a 4-hour slot.
So here's my thought. My thought is, while I appreciate the 50 minutes, there's 2 thoughts I have. The first thought is more, not less, which means
Shorter time frame.
more, not less time, which means more, not less days, and spreading it out and figuring out a way. And I know there's this magic date that everybody is shooting for, but I'm very comfortable, as long as you're not going anywhere, Ted, that we have an interim director that we can extend your contract. Okay, so that's number 1. I don't mind finding another date that, yes, we may find ourselves in October and November, and we may not have somebody on board until December. That, again, this is too important of a vote for me to rush it. Having said that, if the alternative to me would be if we had a number of candidates that's more than 8, that's somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 or 11, whatever that magic cutoff is, and we gave them 30 minutes each. And that was their 30 minutes to wow us. remember that a large portion of this job is community outreach and the ability to communicate. And we gave them, 20 minutes of come wow us. Yes, I've seen you on paper. Again, I think all of you have the advantage I don't. Come wow us and tell us what what your vision is. Talk a little bit about your experience, but give them 20 minutes to say whatever they want. If they want to whistle Dixie, let them whistle Dixie. But that's their 20 minutes. And then each of us can ask one question if we want or not. And that gives us 10 minutes of questions. I will feel much better about the 5 or 6. Again, on paper, I feel 100% certain about my about how I evaluated. But not one single one of these people have I ever met. I couldn't tell you what they look like, what they sound like, how effective they are standing at a podium. That could totally change my opinion. And I looked when I got Holly sent on Monday, everyone else's scores. I looked, I was like, ooh, I didn't even have that person very high. And I went back and I reevaluated and I thought, I see why somebody would have thought that about this person. I didn't see that because I just read it. So again, I know, Ted, and I know you're sitting there inside going, I cannot believe he is doing this and trying to extend this period of time. But we got right with our interim director. I want to get right with our permanent director.
To comment, you just described the second round of interviews. I think in our mind, exactly what you said is what you want 3 candidates to do. And if you think of it like a hearing on Capitol Hill, you get the presentation and then you get 10 minutes, you get 10 minutes, you get 10 minutes, you ask whatever questions you want to really grill them on their vision and what they want to do. But to get to those 3 candidates, I'm suggesting from my professional experience, is you really have to grill the candidates on their prior experiences so you get rid of the BS. Because you're going to get BS in the resume. You're going to get BS when they stand there and tell you how wonderful they are. But when I ask you a question to tell me exactly how you handled this problem and what you did and what the result was, I'm going to know whether or not you have the skills to do the job. Now, your important point, though, is I want to know if you're the person that we can work with to do the job. And I think that becomes the critical element of that second round of interviews.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Commissioner.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I like Mr. Mitchell's concept about allowing them to stand at the podium or wherever and just talk about themselves. I wouldn't want to give them 20 minutes, however. But I think in the process of their interview, if it's a 30-minute interview, I think it would be good to allow them maybe 10 minutes, a 5-minute presentation. And part of that could be their vision for the Children's Services Council.
I think you, at the last meeting, said that was something you wanted as part of that structured interview, that they had 10 minutes to tell about how they understand the organization and what their strengths are, and then 10 minutes on strategic planning, and then there'd be the structured targeted questions on each of the remaining job dimensions. Is that what you?
Ted?
Well, the process that Dr. Coteau is going to be suggesting in a few minutes is within that 50 minutes, a 10-minute presentation.
Why don't we maybe skip around on the agenda a little bit and come back to this question? And Dr. Coteau, you can lay out in a coherent way what staff is recommending for our interview process.
Okay, we've had some conversations about what you had said last time, and I regret I wasn't involved in that. But my understanding is we're looking at a two-step process here. This interview process within a 50-minute time frame, which fit your schedule, which was the given that we were working with, was the model that we came up with. But there's one important thing, given the public nature of this council, is that whatever we do, it has to be seen as transparent, has to be seen as objective, and it has to be seen as fair, not just to the candidates as they experience the interviews, but also to the community that's watching this process, who want to be sure it's not just your personal opinion here, but that there's some data, some facts that you're operating from. So our intent in that 50 minutes was to try and get at each of those job dimensions and use a targeted behavioral approach, which asks questions that have people tell us what they did related to those job dimensions in their past experiences. We also need a common rating scale so that, like what you have here, you have something to work from, but again, you don't let the scale determine your final decision. You make that based on your ratings and your personal observations. The second round, if you take 10 people and you select 3 for the second round, then we're looking at a less structured environment where you ask them how they're going to address the key issues that we're being faced with in this community that the council is struggling with. And then you give each of the committee members substantive time to ask the follow-up questions, to ask those hard questions that you personally are coming from. And each of you may bring a different perspective, and that's ideal. You want someone who's focused on cultural issues, someone who's focused on organizational, someone who wants to focus on board. Whatever you choose, you have that opportunity to do that. And that really allows you to have data and the personal observation to make your final recommendation to the council. Now, with the first structured interview, there are a couple of factors that I think are important. One is time. You have to manage the time so that one candidate doesn't get any more time than the other candidates, and that you get all the dimensions covered in the process. The second is that you got to be sure that everybody on the committee gets to make every interview session, because you can't vote on who to move forward if you didn't hear all the interviews. So we work off of your schedules to be sure that that's going to happen. The next step is that all candidates need to answer the same questions. So it's fair, so that there's no apparent bias in the process, and that we can use a rating scale across those questions that we all can agree on. And, I'm willing to give you some sample questions, and Ted has suggested some areas we might assign a job dimension to each of you. And if you have a better question, we'll work it out. That how can we focus on their past behavior to see how they might act in the future. We have the 2 questions that you identified last time, to send them ahead of time to get a written response, so they get a chance to talk about that, but we'll go ahead and rate those as part of communication, as part of planning and accountability. I've done this 100 times, this structured interview process. The biggest danger is someone who talks about something that's not in the question. That you can ask for clarification, you can ask for some follow-up, but we have to avoid the opportunity of you talking instead of the candidate talking, right, so that everybody else in the committee can do a fair rating. So as a facilitator, one of the roles that I can play and have played in the past is I summarize what the person is trying to say so that you can do a good job with your scoring. But the follow-up, if they're not doing very well, to dig a little deeper is something that I'm trained to do that will help the committee out in terms of getting information. I offer a 5-point scale. This is one that the industry model it uses that looks at what was the situation the person or the task the person is talking about? Was it significant? Was it insignificant? What was their reaction? Did they do something or did their team do it? And what was the result that have a positive impact for the organization, or is it something that wasn't significant or had a negative impact, which sometimes is positive. But you have a uniform scale of what you're looking for, so that gives you a rating across the candidates that's the same. And then you end up with a summary chart like you've had before you here that allows you to look at the data for each of the candidates across each of the dimensions. And then you make the decisions, not the numbers, not me. You make the decisions. I don't do any rating, just facilitate the process on who to move forward to that second round of interviews. You know, the defensibility of what you're doing is critical, but the openness and the fairness of it is what the community is looking for. And because you're going to be watching this process, having something that's structured and that flows real quickly is your advantage as well as to the candidate's advantage. So I'm, again, offering my assistance to help with the process, but it has to be structured, it has to be disciplined, and it has to be done in a way that is defensible.
Thank you. I like the values that your process protects. I appreciate that very much. But let me ask a couple of questions. I'm appreciative of what I'm hearing from the commission members that, you know, you want to give people their due. You don't want to eliminate people without justification when we're getting to the number that we're ultimately going to interview. Ultimately, we're going to have to choose among the however many it was, 32 candidates. And we're going to have to set a cutoff. And our choices, it seems to me, our choices are either reduce the number of people that we interview or reduce the amount of time that we interview each one of them for, because we don't have unlimited time. Even though, you know, Mr. Granger may be willing to serve a little bit longer, we don't have unlimited time to do this. And I also think that there is a diminishing return, that if you spend 50 minutes on 10 people, having done domestic violence injunction hearings my entire career, I can tell you that by the time I get to the 10th, I won't have a lot of memory of the first. So I'm worried about the project process getting too long. Go ahead.
For the purpose of discussion, let me recommend two options. One is if we want to maintain a 50-minute interview process for the candidates, I would recommend 8 candidates at 50 minutes. If we want to interview more, I would recommend 12 candidates at 30 minutes. But that would require, all of this is going to require some level of discipline.
Yes, which is where Dr. Croton.
I wouldn't suggest that we go any higher than 12.
What do you think about the possibility of a reduced amount of time for more candidates?
From my experience, it is difficult to get people to answer 6 questions in 40 minutes or so.
Yeah, it takes a lot of discipline.
It's a challenge, especially if you're asking the questions and trying to ask some follow-up. If I ask the questions, I probably can manage 6 questions. We'd have to cut it down to 4. You'd have to prioritize which job dimensions that are.
You would have to tell people how much time they have for each question.
Right.
Got
That's
it.
what you do.
These are your 6 questions. You've got 2
Right.
minutes.
You have to cut them off. And that,
No,
you know, again, it's something I can do. I would, if you just use the first 2 questions written and not allow them to talk about it and just had 30 minutes for direct behavioral targeted questions, that's managed. But I think the point is you do want to hear them extemporaneously or semi-extemporaneously somewhat. So my inclination would be to support the 8 with the longer period of time, or if you go to 10 or 12, add an additional day, as Mr. Mitchell was suggesting, to stretch the process out one more couple of weeks or whatever it would take to find a common day that you have.
Principal, Vice Chair.
So I've had this experience, and I haven't had the experience of selecting a executive director, but this process is a very tedious process, but I think is precisely what we need at 50 minutes, 55 minutes, because when someone is put on the stage, and literally that's what it is, they're put on the stage and these questions are given to them, you have to respond in a certain way in order to fully be able to evaluate that person in all of the areas. Having said that, I think it's best to give that person more time to do that, which would lend us to 8 people rather than more, because I think the hope, in order for this process to go the way that you described it, each person would have to be given at least 50 minutes to answer those questions thoroughly. And I think once we get to that point, round 2 is when they can have the opportunity to share whatever they like. But this kind of makes it an even playing field for everybody, because we'd be able to give our responses, our 5-point scale for each response that they give. So I would go for 8.
Commissioner.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd just like to ask a question to Dr. Quinto. Is it important or significant that everybody is interviewed the same day?
No, you have that flexibility to schedule around your schedule and
Okay.
obviously their schedule. But each stands alone, so to speak. There is always a little danger that someone comes out of the interview and talks to somebody else and says, oh, this is what they asked. And it may give them a little bit of an advantage. But if you ask the question the right way, you dig it, you can see when they're feeding you a line or when they really have had that experience.
Commissioner.
Yes, and so this process is part of the sunshine. It's accessible. So, I'm thinking, I don't want to cut off the number of people that we interview because of the time. I just think we need to make a decision that is fair to give everybody. If you recommend 50 minutes, and you think based on your experience, there's ample time to allow candidates to present themselves and respond to questions, adequately and fully. That's what I'd rather do. But I don't want us to adopt the 50 minutes and say, well, we got to cut it down to 6 people or 8 people. I don't think one should drive the other. If we have to do 2 days, I just believe we do 2 days, and it might be better. But for the committee people, because like Ted said, at the end, it might be a disadvantage for the last person that comes in for the interview because we're tired, we're fatigued.
Yeah.
So we might want to, I think, first decide the number that we want to interview and then bifurcate the process. I don't think we should try to put it all in one day. Thank you. Thank you. Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you, Paul. Mr. Mitchell.
So the one advantage I have is I kind of looked at who I graded, and they're basically all in the top, not all of them. But to Commissioner Cummings' point, if we do break this up and then let's do it for a logical reason, not, remember at the last meeting I said, please stop saying top 10. I'm a big David Letterman fan, but for God's sake, it's top 10 is so arbitrary. Here we are talking about wanting to be fair, and we're talking about a number because it's a catchphrase over, decade after decade. Let's look at the numbers. And if you look at the numbers, they're sort of a logical break at number 14, that there's a gap. It's under 20. So if you're looking for sort of a bigger number, to me, 14 is good. And then as you go up,
the difference between 21.8 and 22 or 22 and 22.2 is the difference between 8 and 9. You get interviewed or you don't because of 2/10. I'm thinking to myself, oh my heavens, that number 9 person, what, I know where I did these evaluations and I was thorough. I did them over time. I finished them one day and then I went back and I looked at them a second day. I made a couple of changes, but there was nothing perfect about this. So, you know, I am a vote for more, not less. But if it's going to be, if it's going to be more, I like 14 as the number because I think there's
Big drop off.
a drop off. If it's fewer,
As
I don't see where you cut it.
As you look at the rankings, 14 is
That
the
is a
line
lot.
you can draw there. That is a lot.
That is a lot of numbers.
If you look at
For
who
interviews,
had
holy cow.
at least 3 raters giving them 20 or better across the ratings, you have 12 who fall into that category. You had the 5 agreed, 4 agreed, and then if you look at who 3 agreed on and rated highly, that's 12 people. But even that is a large number for you to sit through.
So just go back to, talk about that chart right there, if you would, Jim.
Okay, that chart is where,
The one before, actually, the one,
well,
the one where,
this one is where all 5 of you agreed they were rated highly. Okay, if you look at,
right, back one, back
You're
one. back
21.
one.
It's the one that, no, it's not that one. It's the one everybody's
the next
20 or
one
above.
is where you have
That's the
That's
one.
it.
4 or more.
Yeah, so I mean, that's
That's 6
so
people.
Paul, here's a justification for, that's a logical justification.
Right.
It's not a top 10 list, but it's 4 or more ranked, each of those 4 of us or more ranked over 20. Plus, if you went with
In the top
Ms.
6.
Green, then we'd
or
have,
seven,
then we'd have the top 7. Yeah.
or the top 6.
Well, if you added Ms. Green, you'd have 7.
But what,
Because you're.
Because it's an average.
ranking the-
Because they're ranked here by average, but what the,
So
what the.
throw out average.
I know.
And if you just wanted 4 of us had them in the top 6, it's the top 5 plus, is it Mahoney?
Yeah,
Okay, so that gives us our top 6. I'm good with that. I mean, totally good with that. Why would we, I mean, again, it's the idea that that 4 of 5 of us, 4 out of 5, heck, this sounds like a Trident commercial. 4 out of 5 dentists who surveyed picked Trident. Well, we've got our top 6 then. So if we want a smaller number, I think 6 is logical. And if we want a larger number, I think 14 is logical.
my father.
And my only comment
Oh, is that right?
about this screen is the point that I made earlier about the other 2 issues you have to keep in mind, diversity and local versus out of town. And she does add to both of those categories, which makes it a little more defensible to the community in terms of your selection process.
So were we supposed to go through, I candidly, I couldn't tell you male and female just because of names. I could be wrong, but I didn't know that we were going through and like.
You were not
Oh,
asked to
okay,
do that.
okay.
And I am
This is.
suggesting that the community, as they watch you, those 2 criteria are issues that have come up and
Got
will come up, and this would help you justify the selection that you have, that you're
Yeah,
representing.
and
Well, you're privy to information that we're not. I would assume that would be.
And Paul, the yellow highlighting justifies stopping at 7, stopping at Mahoney.
Right.
And then the average justifies all 7, even though,
Got it.
even though
So
candidate 6 was not, the
So I'm gonna throw a motion out there, Mr. Chairman, of going with the top 8 and leaving it at,
Top 8.
Yes.
I'll second that motion.
Is there discussion?
Yes,
Commissioner?
yes, sir. I just need some clarification. So the motion is to go with the top 8 on our list
Yes, ma'am. So it would
and
be,
not on the list that was up there.
yes.
Yes.
So
that
top
list.
do you have
Eight
your
of that
your
list.
spreadsheet? So
Yes.
it goes from,
Go
going
back
by
up.
first names, it's Kelly, Chris, Tracy, Rodney, Roger, Sika Rose, Joe, and Travis.
Okay, that's the top 8.
That's the top 8.
Okay.
All right, so there's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Commissioner Cummings, you look like you've got discussion in you.
Well, no, I just wanted clarification, Mr. Chair, because I thought we were looking at the chart up there and we were
We were.
skipping, okay. But your motion is based on the ranking that we have.
Which is the same as
It's
that.
the same ranking. It just highlighted 6 of
Certain.
the,
things, okay.
Right. And I took 7 and I put 6 and 8 in there. Yes, number 6 was Ms. Green and number 8 was Mr.
Yeah.
Anderson.
And just as a comment that those 8 would be doable within the proposed time frame that
50
you have
minutes.
before you.
all right. But including the Saturday though, right?
Right.
Yeah, so we're going to be working on Saturday.
So, Mr. Chair.
Yes,
so
Commissioner
with the
Cummings.
proposed schedule that was there, are we still looking to interview everybody one day, the same day?
No, ma'am. So
No,
we're going
2 different days.
We're going to interview some Saturday, September 18. We'll have to figure out how this works, and some Monday, September 20.
You got this.
Yes, Mr. Granger, you're recognized.
I guess a couple of points, Mr.
schedule.
Chair. If it's 50 minutes per, the Saturday morning from 9 to 12, I think is set. And I think, thank you to Mr. Mitchell, who has a major thing that he is changing on his calendar to accomplish this.
I can't do the
You
18th.
can't do the 18th?
No, it's a kid going to college trip.
Okay, so here's an issue I was going to raise a moment ago. First of all, please know that Holly and I are here until this gets done. And whether it happens in November, it happens in October, it happens in January, we're here because it needs to be done right.
We may never hire anyone.
Yeah. Well, the issue is between now and the October meeting, the dates that you see in front of you are the only dates when all of you can make it. And we had to reach for a Saturday to make that happen. So there's 2 considerations with that. One is the total number of dates that we can find, but also you don't want to do a series of interviews in the first round one day and 3 weeks later do the second round because then you've forgotten. So they need to be relatively close together for each phase. So everybody kind of keeps it together. So I guess I would say if Saturday, the 18th is out, obviously for very good reasons, then we move the schedule back. And we're going to have to come back to some of y'all and either say, can you rearrange your schedules or we're going to wait until November to do this? And then we get to the holidays.
Well, okay.
I'm okay not being there, letting the crew, if it comes down to that kind of, I just can't get up this.
I think the problem with that is what Mr. Dr.
we all-
Coteau just said is if you don't see all the interviews, then
No, I agree. I would have to wait till the next round. I would be out. the first.
PB would bail until we get to the short list.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I think though that if all we did is move down one, so skip September 18th, the Saturday, go to the
The
20th for the first and October 4th for the second half of the first. And then we'll figure out at that point how many round 2 interviews we
We
want to
need.
perform.
Mhm.
So there's 2 weeks of a gap. But we've already
November.
got those dates on our calendar.
Yeah, but that mean, and which is fine. That just means we're not going to get to a recommendation
on
To-
December. Right,
until November, December.
Right.
right.
All right. Is that, so should we have a, Mr. Granger, help me?
No, I think that works. I think what that does is it pushes to Wednesday, October 6th, the decision on who will go to the second round.
Correct.
And then we'll just need to figure out for scheduling purposes, when that second round can happen.
Right.
Yep.
The other thing is, and let me tell you, as I was sitting here looking at this, the other advantage, and I can't remember who said this, but I think Commissioner Cummings, you did, is we don't want to be exhausted. I don't want to be in hour 6 and it's like, all right, Ms. whatever your name is, come on up. And I'm like,
Bad
yeah,
10, death
whatever,
march of
right?
interviews.
So we've got 8. We do 4 on one day at 50 minutes. And by the way, human beings, 4 hours is a long time for, for this guy with ADD to sit still. And then do 4 another day, give a little bit of time to digest. We come back on the 6th. We talk about who the final, who we would like. And my guess is after we've done this and interviewed, there are going to be only, 2 or 3 names that are blatantly obvious.
Cream rise to the top.
And so that will be one day.
All right. So,
Does that work?
so maybe, so we've got 2, we got a motion on the table, right? We got a motion before us, which is the 8, right?
Right.
The 8. Any other discussion of interviewing 8? Any objection? So the motion carries. We'll interview the top 8. We're going to by average. Now we've got a second motion, which is to eliminate Saturday, break our first round interviews up between Monday, September 20. So could we do the second round of interviews Thursday, September 23rd, Ted? That's not.
Well,
really-
that's only an hour and a half meeting.
Yeah,
that,
that's true.
Fits in people's.
So we're
time.
going to eliminate that meeting is what we're
Yes, sir.
going to
We'll
do.
eliminate Saturday, the 18th and September 23rd.
And then the second, and then our, so we'll call that first round A is Monday, September 20. And second round A is Monday, October 4. Is that where we're at, Ted? First round B.
Right.
Is Monday, October 4. All right.
So,
And then on October 6th, we'll come together to decide who will make it to the final.
Right, short list.
so just for clarification.
Yes, please.
October the 4th, we would interview the last 4.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Four interviews, Monday, the 20th, 4 interviews, Monday, October 4th.
Okay, great. And Saturday, the 18th is canceled.
Saturday, the 18th is canceled and Thursday, the 23rd is canceled.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, the only thing that I would say is for those, I don't know how many of the 8 are from out of town, but I think that we should give the out of town people at least the first choice. Again, I have no idea of the top 8. Is it 1 or 2? But I think we should give them the first choice as to whether they want the 20th or the 4th, just because they're coming so
Travel
far.
It's
flexibility.
about half.
What's that?
It's about half.
Is it? Okay.
Do your best. All right, so excellent. Okay, so that's our plan. We've got a plan. We know who we're going to vote, who we're going to interview. We've got a schedule to get through the short list. The rest of the scheduling is to be done. Conduct, that brings us to now. But now we've heard from Dr. Cruto. I want to back up now all the way back to the proposed interview format with Dr. Am I saying your name right, by the way? Cruto. I'm going to ask for a motion that we do it the way he's telling us to do it, because now I understand the values that we're serving and doing it his way. So do I have a motion to follow the Dr. Croteau method with Dr. Croteau asking at least the follow-up questions?
So just for clarification, Your Honor,
Yes.
he's told us a whole lot, so I'm not quite sure. With him asking the questions, is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm hoping for.
That he would ask the question?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
and the follow-up questions as well, is what,
Well,
all questions.
Jim, why
Let me
don't you tell us what you're
Yeah, tell us.
proposing?
Right,
We're talking two types of interviews, one interview and one presentation public, where the public will participate, but you'll have much more flexibility in the questioning. In the first structured interview, I'd be working with you and with Ted, where you would have one dimension that you'd be asking the questions. And we've scheduled 45-minute training to help you with that. And I would do the follow-up questions. So everyone would be involved in every interview, asking the same question to each of the candidates. And as you get more comfortable with the process, you'll be doing probably more follow-up as we go along than I will have to do. But in the first couple, till we get the system comfortable for you, I'll be spending more time. But at the end of every question, I'll try to summarize what they said so that you can rate it real easily. So you're going to take notes, but to make it easier for you to give a rating to it. So I won't be asking all the questions. I'll be helping with the follow-up. And like I said, as we go along, you'll be doing more and I'll be doing less.
Yes,
yes,
Commissioner
Mr.
Cummings.
Chair. No, I like what Dr. Croteau has said and your recommendation, but I think it's important that we are consistent with each one of the candidates. I think if Dr. Croteau is going to ask the question, that's fine. If we're let loose to do follow-up questions, I might do a follow-up with this candidate. Okay. And somebody else might do a follow-up with another candidate.
No,
You know,
if it's your question, it'll be either you or me that will.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
If you're asking the question, either you'll do the follow-up or I'll do the follow-up. The other committee members won't, because they have their own question.
Okay, so we will have the same question for each candidate, is basically what you're saying. So that would be the
And
consistency.
I'm telling
Okay,
you, by the fourth candidate, you will be able to put them on the spot and really dig into it.
okay, I understand. Thanks for the clarification. Thank you. Your
So
Honor.
I'm going to make the same point that I made at the last meeting, and that is I'm going to ask questions that are important to me, and I may not ask the same question of all 8 applicants because all 8 applicants have a different background. And this is not, if we were evaluating 8 racers in a track race, they all get the exact same length of track that they have to run. They have the same gun that goes off, and they have the same finish line. The applicants that I rated, that again are most of them are in the top 8, so I'm gonna see the people that I rated well, have very different backgrounds. And for me to ask the same question of all 8 people is at least in my opinion, taking that racing metaphor one step further, it's doing my best to create the perfect horse for a race and creating the camel. I'm like, I don't want to ask Mr. Anderson the same question that I want to ask Mrs. Audie. And I don't know. I just threw those out because I saw those 2 names.
And I hate to interrupt, but I'm telling you that not asking the same question in this particular forum that you're going to be in, you are putting yourself at risk, either the candidates or the public, accusing you of bias or some kind of.
And they're entitled to
Yeah.
accuse me of that.
But
They can
we're all-
accuse me, Mr. Croteau, just a
Yeah,
moment.
I'm sorry.
As I mentioned in the last meeting, we have 4 statewide elected officials who hire agency heads in a public meeting. All 4 of them are entitled to ask questions. When Governor DeSantis took 15 names that the county commission submitted to him and selected me, he didn't say I have to go through someone to ask a question of the person who's going to run this show for 10 years. I don't intend to ask an inappropriate question, but I don't want to come up with a plain vanilla, bland question to ask of all of these applicants. They're completely different. There are some who've done hands-on stuff that are so incredibly impressive, and I'd like to hear about that.
Well,
There-
that's the second round. The way we play in the second round is to allow you.
So
to-
so the bias is okay in the second round, but not the first round?
So look at, I'll tell you how I think about this. And one of the things that Jim said, Dr. Croteau said, was that the purpose of this structured interview is to give each one of the candidates a level playing field. But you're going to get at, and the questions are based on the criteria that we established for rating these candidates, and really the values that the Children's Service has established. It's going to be up to the candidates to tell us what in their background, because we're not going to ask them, I'm assuming the questions are not going to be, what is the average number of, kids who in Leon County who have, who make their readiness, their kindergarten readiness. The questions are going to be open-ended questions designed for them to share with us what their what their background.
Targeted behavioral questions would say, tell us a time when you had to work with a policy issue with your board that was challenging and difficult. What did you do and what was the result? Because we're looking at their past behavior to kind of predict their future behavior.
Right.
But the point of getting at the in-depth detail of their backgrounds that Mr. Mitchell's talking about, we don't have time to do that in the first round. We do have time in the second round to be able to plan the opportunity to get at that level. That
Sure. Mark, go ahead.
My experience, and I've interviewed a lot. I think a lot of us around the table have interviewed a fair amount. 50 minutes is a lot of time for a screening interview. And these are screening interviews. We're trying to get it narrowed down to the final 2, 3 you would anticipate. I actually agree with Paul that there needs to, that we can't be so regimented that we can't ask a question, because it could be that someone just really is very good at answering very succinctly. And if we only ask 6 questions, we're done in 15 minutes or 20 minutes. And then that's it. Then we have, then that next person takes the entire 50 minutes. My belief is that if we are uniform in the 6 questions, let's make sure every candidate gets the 6 questions and they are given the chance to answer those 6. But beyond the 6, I think in 50 minutes, we should be able to have some extra time to ask what other things that might arise. And some of the questions are going to be unique to that individual because they're going to bring unique experiences and perspective. And we're going to have questions about that. So I think as long as there's uniformity in that all the candidates have the same exact base set of questions, that's fine, because that's what gives uniformity. Beyond that, I think we should be able to ask whatever questions come to mind.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that, and the fact that you rate only the answers to those questions, that gives you the data, but you can get that additional information that can influence your decision.
It might have some bearing on how we weight the 6 questions.
So,
Mr. O'Brien. I feel very comfortable with that, Mr. Chair.
all right, so that is our interview process. Dr. Cruteau, we're going to anticipate that you will turn that into an interview process and train us.
Okay.
As a point of clarification, I understand there's a motion on the table. Could that motion be repeated for the record?
Commissioner.
So what, where are we?
We're going to have a
So
structured.
we already
structured-
voted on the 8, right? So-
Yes,
Yeah.
we voted on the 8.
So what's this motion?
Structured interview with follow-up by the committee members,
Yes.
As recommended by.
as recommended by Dr. Cruteau.
And no more than 6 standard questions, right?
Right.
All right.
All right, excellent. All
May I
right, so
ask
that's,
a quick point of quick clarification? Sorry.
yes,
The last page in your packet, I believe summarizes what I think we just agreed upon, which still gives them the ability to do a brief presentation at the beginning and then structured questions on one part of that presentation and the 5 questions. And then if there's any extra time for follow-up, with the exception of if there's extra time for follow-up.
Do we want to limit the amount of the brief presentation, kind of the self?
That was agreed upon at the last meeting, a 10-minute
Yeah, but we need
presentation
to,
do a what's
some
our
people may
vision,
take
what
30
are you-
minutes to do that. I think we're gonna have to
That's my
find.
job, is to cut them off.
So how much
Okay.
time for that? 5 minutes?
10 minutes maximum.
Okay,
10 minutes max, and if they finish early, they finish early.
okay.
perfect.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're on the same page.
So, Mr. Chair, I just want one quick thing, and that is the first 4 interviews will not have the benefit, as I understand it, of knowing the exact questions that we're going to ask. But 2 weeks later, the next 4 will. So if we're going to do this in the very cookie cutter, plain vanilla, not way I interview people, but nonetheless, so that it's transparent and passes the Dr. Cruteau test, then I think it is only fair that we figure out what those initial questions are and we provide them to all 8 of the applicants and let them know you will be doing a presentation to open things up. We would like you to answer these questions, and there may be follow-up questions.
That
I'm just being fair.
allows people to write their resume to answer your questions and then read the resume in the setting. I think giving them the job dimensions and telling them the scoring rubric, saying we're going to ask a question about board relations, community relations, and so on, and we're going to be looking for specific situations, your actions and the results, gives them the framework, and then we can be very specific in the questions. And most people don't remember the question when they go after they leave the meeting. They remember their answer, whether it's.
Which is my point. If you're in the second round, you're interviewee 5 through 8, you have had the advantage of hearing the interview questions from 2 weeks prior and can sit there with your spouse, loved one, speech coach, whatever, and say, fire away, let's go. And that is not, we're not trying to give someone an advantage based on when they're interviewed.
If I might, this goes to the next agenda item, Judge, in terms of the sunshine. Sunshine says this is a public meeting.
Right.
We have been streaming the meetings so the public can understand what the council is doing. It would be our recommendation not to stream the interviews to make sure that those questions do not get out. And the minutes will summarize what the questions are, board relations, et cetera, but will not include what the exact questions are.
You need a motion on that? Because I will wrongly make that motion.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion moved and second to not stream the interviews. Commissioner Cummings.
Do we have an option if we're operating in the sunshine?
The
The sun-
sunshine
the
does not-
extent,
The
the
sunshine
extent
does
is
not require us to broadcast.
not to broadcast. Oh, okay,
And technically,
okay.
technically, this is the executive committee +2. So we can go into executive session, like where, again, are we going to tell people you're not allowed to sit in here? Like the 4 people that are here today, you're not allowed to sit in here. If anyone does have a favorite candidate and they're in the second round, are we Okay, okay. I was listening to, it has to be even across the board and we have to be completely fair. Well, I don't think we're being fair to the people on the second day, but that's just my opinion.
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Cummings.
Thank you. I agree with Paul on that issue. I think not streaming it is one thing, but it's open to the public. It's another thing. And I really don't have a problem with providing the questions to the applicants because they would all be prepared. They would all have the same opportunity for preparation. I think that would appear more fair to all the candidates. I do have a concern about interviewing the first 4, and then we got over a week later when we interview the second 4. And there could be some advantage, some disadvantage as well. So I think it's fair and equitable. And I've seen situations where the questions are given to applicants ahead of time. They would all be on the same level. They would all have that same advantage, and they could all prepare accordingly.
Mr. O'Brien, do you recognize?
I don't have an opinion on whether the 6 questions are put out there in advance, although it is sometimes interesting to see how people answer off the cuff. Because that tells you a little bit about their leadership and their ability to formulate problem solving. I mean, if you give them the questions, all of us would like to take it's like an open book exam. It's different when you don't have the questions in advance. I don't think that we should allow other candidates to sit in while we're interviewing other candidates, because that is a very unfair advantage. If they see how other people are answering questions, and then they can basically formulate their answers based upon how the prior candidates answered. So I would say, I don't care if we allow anybody else in, but I would not allow any of the candidates to sit in during the interview session.
I have a alternative solution. to
Help.
When I prepare interview questionnaires, I usually prepare at least 1, sometimes 2 alternative questions on the same dimension that get at a little different spin, but it addresses that job dimension. And Dr. Connors, if you remember, you have the first and the second, and you can go to a third if you're in trouble or you don't get a good answer. So I'm prepared to work with you all to get a set of questions for the first round and then a comparable set for the second round that gets at the same job dimensions, but protects the nature of those questions. And you don't have to send them out, because Mr. O'Brien's point is well taken, that if you know what the question is going to be, you really can work the answer to your advantage. And that spontaneity that comes out when you have to think for a couple of minutes and then speak, you really learn who can handle the job. So I offer that as an option for your consideration.
All right, so I'm getting a little worried that,
You got trimming.
well, I'm worried about that, but I'm also worried that staff needs to be staff, board needs to be board, and we need to at some point, we've given you the direction and the values that we're trying to protect, and we're going to trust you guys to implement. So I think that's the plan, is that we're going to ask Dr. Cruto to work with Mr. Granger, Ms. McPhail, to come up with a structured interview process that is fair and preserves spontaneity as best we can. We're gonna do 4 and 4. We're gonna do them on the dates that we've set. All right, so.
And they're not, based on Mr. O'Brien's motion, they will not be streamed live.
Yeah, they will not be streamed live, and the people that are being interviewed are gonna wait outside until we call them in for the interview, just like,
There's a motion and a second. Was there a vote?
I'm assuming we've got
unanimous.
consensus.
Not objection, yeah.
Yes, Yes, close enough, I think.
All right, thank you again for letting me participate in this process. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
You.
So that brings us to member comment. Any other member comment? We've all commented and we are adjourned.
Right
Thank you,
on
folks.
time. 1 minute, actually.
So it's.
Wait till you see us.
Did you time it? It's perfect.
Oh, Jesus.
We have a Florida Supreme Court.
You get to make individual decisions,
And,
right? I think that's the difference.
What's that?
You, when you interview,
Yeah.
you're making your individual decision. And that's good, that's valuable.
And
Of course, I really answered all these questions.